It was a normal Tuesday morning at Lincoln High School. The sound of lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking across the tiled floor, and the usual chatter of teenagers filled the air. Nothing seemed out of place until it was. At 8:17 a.m., the school intercom crackled with panic. Lockdown. This is not a drill. Moments earlier, 16-year-old Jason Miller, once described by teachers as quiet but polite, had done the unimaginable. He attacked one of his classmates, fatally. The news would later call it the day innocence died. Jason was the kind of kid no one expected trouble from. He had decent grades, a small circle of friends, and a mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. But behind the calm exterior was a storm that had been brewing for months. He'd been bullied, mocked, and humiliated both at school and online. Police would later uncover dozens of angry journal entries, filled with rage, despair, and a thirst for revenge. "They'll see what happens when I'm done," one line read. When officers entered the school that morning, Jason didn't resist. He dropped the blood-stained knife and whispered, "I didn't mean to." He just wouldn't stop, but prosecutors said otherwise. They found evidence that Jason had planned the attack days before, drawing floor maps of the school, listing the names of students who had hurt him. That raised the chilling question at the heart of this story. Was Jason acting out of uncontrollable teenage rage, or had he crossed into something far darker, deliberate, and planned? Experts were divided. Some said his act was the tragic breaking point of a bullied teen. Others called it premeditated murder, hidden behind the face of a child. The case exploded across the media. Headlines read, "Killer Kid or Broken Boy?" Social media lit up with debates about mental health, violence in youth, and whether a teenager should ever face life in prison. Every killer kid has a story, but disturbingly, many of those stories sound the same. A troubled home, a history of bullying, sudden isolation. Then one day something snaps. Psychologists call it the threshold of violence. It's the invisible line between anger and action, a line most people never cross. But for some teenagers, emotional control fractures under pressure, and that's when the darkness surfaces. In 1993, America met Eric Smith, a 13-year-old boy from Steuben County, New York. With his bright red hair and freckled face, he looked harmless, innocent even. But one summer morning, Eric lured a 4-year-old boy named Derek Roby into the woods and brutally killed him. The crime was so violent that even veteran detectives were shaken. Eric later said, "I just lost control," but investigators found no sign of rage, only cold precision. He placed the body neatly, covered it with leaves, and walked home as if nothing had happened. The case became a nationwide debate. Can a child understand evil? And if they can, how do we punish them? Then came Lionel Tate, the 12-year-old from Florida who killed 6-year-old Tiffany Unick in 1999. He claimed it was an accident, roughhousing gone wrong. But the autopsy told a different story. Over 30 injuries, consistent with a brutal beating. He was sentenced to life in prison, the youngest in U.S. history to receive that sentence. These cases weren't isolated. Across America, teenagers were committing crimes once thought unimaginable for their age. Each story different, yet eerily familiar. Experts began noticing patterns. Many of these young offenders came from homes filled with neglect, abuse, or emotional instability. Others showed early signs of conduct disorder, cruelty to animals, fascination with weapons, or a disturbing lack of empathy. But even with warning signs, no one wanted to believe a child could kill. As one FBI profiler put it, "The face of evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes, it looks like a kid from next door." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. The interrogation room is cold, quiet, and sterile. A place designed to strip away comfort and reveal the truth. For detectives, it's familiar territory. But when the suspect sitting across the table is a child, everything changes. That's exactly what investigators faced in case after case of teenage murderers. Sitting across from them wasn't a hardened criminal. It was a kid barely tall enough to see over the table. But behind those blank stares and nervous fidgeting, detectives often saw something chilling. calculation. In the case of Joshua Phillips, a 14-year-old from Jacksonville, Florida, investigators remember the moment his calm demeanor began to crack. Joshua had been missing school for days when his mother discovered something horrifying: the body of 8-year-old Maddie Clifton hidden under his bed. During questioning, Joshua first claimed it was an accident, that they had been playing baseball and she was hit by the ball. But detectives noticed inconsistencies. The details didn't match the evidence. When they pressed harder, the story unraveled, revealing a shocking level of deception for someone so young. Experts say these interrogations show two sides of a teenage killer's mind: panic and performance. Some genuinely crumble under guilt, breaking down in tears. Others remain eerily composed, weaving half-truths and lies as though they're rehearsed. Detective Maria Lopez, a veteran in juvenile homicide cases, once said, "They don't cry for the victim, they cry because they got caught." But there's another side to it. Some of these kids don't fully understand the finality of death. To them, killing might feel like a game gone wrong, a blur of emotion with irreversible consequences. It's not always malice, sometimes it's detachment. That's why interrogating minors is such a controversial process. Should they be treated like adults when the crime itself shows adult-level violence? Or should their words be weighed through the lens of immaturity and trauma? Psychologists warn that teenagers' brains are still developing, especially the part that controls impulse and foresight. But to grieving families, that explanation feels hollow. Because no matter how young the killer is, the outcome is always the same: a life taken and innocence destroyed. The courtroom falls silent as the young defendant enters, wrists shackled, eyes downcast. The contrast is jarring: a child's face behind the glare of adult justice. For many, it's the moment where sympathy and outrage collide. Across America, prosecutors and defense attorneys have clashed for decades over one question: should children who kill be punished like adults? In the case of Lionel Tate, the answer was yes. At just 12 years old, Tate was convicted of first-degree murder for killing 6-year-old Tiffany Unick. Prosecutors argued that the brutality of the attack, over 30 injuries, proved intent. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, making him the youngest American ever to receive such a punishment. The public was divided. Some said justice had been served. Others were horrified. Could a child truly comprehend the meaning of a lifetime behind bars? Cases like Lionel's forced the justice system to take a hard look at itself. In 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court banned the death penalty for juveniles, citing that teenagers' brains are still developing, particularly in areas related to impulse control and judgment. Then, in 2012, the court ruled that mandatory life sentences without parole for minors were unconstitutional. But that doesn't mean it stopped happening. Across the country, prosecutors still seek adult charges for teens who commit violent crimes, arguing that some acts are so monstrous, age no longer matters. In Michigan, Ethan Crumbley, a 15-year-old school shooter, faced adult sentencing after killing 4 classmates. Prosecutors said his crime was meticulously planned. Defense lawyers countered that he was mentally ill and neglected by his parents. This tug-of-war between justice and rehabilitation lies at the heart of America's debate over youth crime. Some believe in second chances. Others see only the victims who will never grow up. And in every verdict, one truth remains: the courtroom decides the law, but the public decides the morality. Because when the killer is a child, justice is never clear-cut. It's a mirror reflecting society's own fears about innocence, evil, and what it means to grow up in a world capable of creating both. When the cell doors close and the headlines fade, what happens to the children who kill? Do they remain trapped in the darkness that led them there? Or can they truly change? Behind prison walls across America, hundreds of young offenders are serving long sentences for murder. Some entered at 13 or 14, their childhoods replaced by concrete and steel. For many, their only chance at freedom comes decades later, when the system decides if rehabilitation has replaced rage. One of the most talked about examples is Cyntoia Brown. At just 16, she was convicted of murder in Tennessee. Her story of abuse, trauma, and survival raised nationwide questions about how society treats young offenders. especially those shaped by violence before they ever committed it. After 15 years in prison, Cyntoia was granted clemency. Her transformation was undeniable. She earned a college degree, mentored other inmates, and emerged as a voice for reform. But not every case ends in redemption. Some juvenile killers show little remorse, even years later. Psychologists studying these offenders found that while many change with age and therapy, a small number exhibit deep-rooted psychopathy, emotional coldness and manipulation that persists into adulthood. Experts say the difference often lies in environment and empathy. Teen brains are still developing, meaning they can learn, adapt, and even heal. But that healing requires guidance, not just punishment. In recent years, programs across the U.S. have focused on restorative justice, where young offenders meet victims' families, confront their actions, and work toward accountability instead of endless imprisonment. Results show reduced reoffending and greater emotional growth. Still, the debate continues. Can someone who's taken a life as a child ever deserve a second chance? For families of victims, forgiveness can feel impossible. For society, fear of repeat violence lingers. Yet, for some of these now-grown inmates, remorse is real, and the desire to rebuild is powerful. Perhaps the answer isn't whether they can change, but whether we can accept that change. Because if evil can be born young, maybe redemption can too.